Chapter 8. The Whole Truth. Los Angeles, 8 years later, in the spring of 1930. Unlike his famous namesake, Rudolph Valentino Coppola did not live a single day. Upon his death, the stillborn Rudolph Coppola's grief-stricken parents filed a malpractice suit against their obstetrician. During the opening day of the court's proceedings, baby Rudolph's mother, Angelina Coppola, took the witness stand to deliver her heart-rending replies to a line of questioning from the obstetrician's defense attorney. Angelina Coppola was overcome with emotion at several points during her testimony, and this prompted the judge to halt the proceedings to give the woman time to dab her eyes and take a sip of water. It was during one of these pauses that a young woman seated in the courtroom leapt to her feet. Before a stunned courtroom, she yelled out, "I have been sent to protect you, Angelina Coppola. I have been sent to protect you, Angelina Coppola." The woman then rushed forward towards the witness stand. The judge demanded order, while a bailiff restrained the shrieking woman. Despite the bailiff's heroic efforts to wrestle the woman out of the courtroom, she railed on for all to hear. Christmas Day, I was guided by the spirit of Rudolph Valentino, and I found Mrs. Coppola weeping at her son's grave. Rudolph sent me here today, under the spell of his master guide Blackfeather. As the bailiff dragged the woman towards the courtroom doors, her captive dug in her heels, rolled her eyes, and ranted in a language no one understood. The only intelligible words in her tirade, which she repeated again and again, were, "Rudolph Valentino." The woman was later identified as spiritualist and medium Shelley Roan Vier. Although Miss Vier was never heard from again, many people present in the courtroom that day later admitted her claims caused some degree of spine tingling. Even the most skeptical found it difficult to dismiss the unsettling notion that the spirit of Rudolph Valentino guided the medium to find Rudolph Valentino Coppola's mother at her tiny son's grave on Christmas Day. News of the infant Rudolph Valentino Coppola's death did not merit front-page coverage in the LA Times in the spring of 1930. Instead, the headlines announced Babe Ruth's freshly inked contract with the New York Yankees, details of outlaw Clyde Chestnut Barrow's extradition from Ohio to Texas, and the courtroom proceedings of Rudolph Valentino's manager, George Allman. By May 16th, George Allman's hearing on charges of fraud and mismanagement brought against him by Alberto Valentino was finally underway, and the press was hot on the story. Their early coverage reported how the court ordered George temporarily removed as executor pending the outcome of the hearing. In his absence, A.P. Giannini's Bank of Italy was appointed administrator of the Valentino estate. George anticipated his temporary dismissal and Giannini's appointment, but Frank Manillo was livid, hearing that his arch-enemy was assuming authority over Rudy's estate. Frank and George were not the only people impacted by the court's initial orders. The judge also specified the suspension of all disbursement of estate funds, including Alberto's weekly stipend of $100, until a verdict was issued. This was not welcome news for Alberto, as he had grown accustomed to receiving George's regular weekly payments. With estate funds frozen for the duration of the court proceedings, Alberto would be forced to live solely on his modest salary from his office job at MGM Studios. With the exception of the attorneys, his lawsuit against George was about to become a financial strain on everyone involved. Just prior to the first day of court testimony, George was notified that court-appointed accountant Henry Baskerville's audit found no errors or discrepancies in his estate ledgers. When Alberto's attorneys received the results of Baskerville's report, they shifted their focus of the lawsuit from the examination of George's books to the legal definition of his authority. If Alberto could not prove George mismanaged the estate, he would attempt to prove he managed it without the proper authority. As court proceedings got underway, George resigned himself to making the daily trek across Los Angeles to the county courthouse to defend his actions. On the morning of May 15th, he was sworn to tell the whole truth and nothing but, and settled in to spend the remainder of the day on the witness stand. The courtroom was filled to capacity with reporters and spectators, waiting for George's attorney, Leonard Wilson, to cease in his pacing and get down to the business of the day. From his seat on the witness stand, George eyed Alberto's lawyers across the room. He reminded himself that the slick team of Scarborough, Mann, and Sumner were not his real adversaries, for these men were just the latest hired guns of Alberto Valentino. and his behind-the-scenes financial backer, Joe Skink. When Attorney Wilson finally approached the witness stand, he took a deep breath and began his line of questioning. Mr. Ullman, what was your capacity in connection with your employment, if there was any employment, between yourself and Rudolph Valentino at the time of his death? George cleared his throat. I was Mr. Valentino's personal representative and business manager. At the time of Mr. Valentino's death, I knew the exact condition of the affairs and his finances so far as he was concerned, as far as the productions were concerned. I was the only one that did know. Now, Mr. Ullman, Wilson continued, what did you do in connection with the showing or causing to be shown, and any other activities in connection with the disposition, the distribution, and later the showing of Valentino's two pictures, The Son of the Sheik and the Eagle, after the death of Rudolph Valentino? George hesitated for a moment before responding. It was my job to exploit these films and pay off the estate indebtedness. I also had the task of disposing of my friend's personal effects. He had about $16,000 worth of hardware, which he collected as souvenirs, swords, armor, and the like. It cost me $35,000 to fix up the legends and publicize this stuff, but I sold it for $97,000. And I was criticized for spending this $35,000 too. He paused again to collect his thoughts before he continued. In the first place, I began the memorial associations and corresponded with, I would say, estimate between 35,000 and 40,000 people over a period of 2 years. I answered every inquiry and maintained contacts with all fans, with all the admirers of Valentino, just exactly as I did before his death. In fact, I laid more stress, gave these letters more personal attention than I did before his death. Before his death, we were accustomed to sending out form letters with fan pictures. After his death, I sent out personal letters and pictures. I had motion picture slides made, which I distributed throughout the world to the picture theater owners. I addressed all picture theater owners of this country, asking them to secure members of the Valentino Memorial Association. George glanced up at the courtroom clock and proceeded to elaborate. I am trying to group the things that I did as in an orderly a way as I can in order not to make my statement too long. My only purpose after Rudy's death was to perpetuate his name. First, because, as I stated before, of my friendship for him, my love for him. And second of all, because I wanted his pictures to be shown. Because prior to this time, no pictures had ever been shown beyond a time after a man's death. I knew of the difficulties which lay in the way of public opinion. The public's mind forgets people that have been great celebrities. They are forgotten, except in retrospective. I may say I proceeded to operate exactly as I had before his death, with the one exception of not attempting to obtain further employment for him. I kept his pictures alive and exploited and promoted interests of the pictures just exactly as if he had been alive. Leonard Wilson's direct examination of his client then shifted to the situation George faced in New York City following Rudy's death. George replied, I had to overcome the argument of the church as to the mode of burial. I had to engage policemen to keep order in the mob that congregated everywhere. I had between 35 and 40 newspaper reporters constantly around me and kept them supplied with stories and things to keep them going. Reacting to a ripple of interest in the courtroom, Wilson raised his voice to ask, The body lay in state back there for a while? Yes, sir. How long? The body lay in state open to the public for about 2 days, and then we held the body for 6 days more, contrary to the law of New York, in order to give Rudy's brother an opportunity to see the body before it was buried. Wilson turned to face the court before he asked his next question. What was the first thing the brother said to you upon his arrival? George's answer inspired another buzz through the courtroom. He wanted to know how much the estate would amount to. Alberto's attorney, James C. Scarborough, leapt to his feet, demanding at top volume that George's last answer be stricken from the record. This is the end of the first excerpt from Chapter 8. I want to clarify that all of the court testimony has been taken verbatim from the court transcripts of the day. Thank you.